Peter Paul Rubens. The name conjures thunderous movement, voluptuous flesh, and color so alive it seems to breathe. Born in 1577 in Siegen and raised in Antwerp, Rubens rose from a talented trainee to the architect of the Flemish Baroque. He painted altarpieces that threw ropes of bodies into diagonals, mythological scenes that turned classical myths into sensuous theater, and intimate portraits that captured family, status, and affection. Look closely and you'll see more than bravura brushwork. An artist who collected antiquities, ran a busy workshop, and even rode diplomacy between courts. His raising of the cross and descent from the cross refashioned religious drama for a new century. His Three Graces and the Garden of Love rewrote how painters could celebrate pleasure, while portraits like the Straw Hat and his images of Helena Fourment reveal warmth and domestic life. From landscapes and studies to monumental triptychs, Rubens' range is astonishing. Stay with me and we'll unpack the techniques, the stories, and the curious details that keep viewers returning to his canvases centuries later. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us keep creating more educational videos like this one. Rubens' story begins in a Europe recovering from religious and political upheaval. He trained in Antwerp and then spent 8 transformative years in Italy from 1600 to 1608. There, he absorbed Titian's chromatic richness, studied classical sculpture in Rome, and absorbed the compositional energy of late Renaissance masters. These Italian lessons surface in works like The Three Graces and The Death of Adonis, where sensuous anatomy and a warm Venetian palette create an almost tactile presence. The Garden of Love, painted after his return, shows that intoxicating mix of northern detail with Italian colorism, rippling fabrics, bright flesh tones, and a confident, joyous handling of group composition. Italy taught him how to orchestrate large groups, how to make marble seem to breathe, and how to use color to lead the eye. That synthesis, northern observation plus southern exuberance, became Rubens' signature. Back in Antwerp, Rubens became the master of the monumental altarpiece. Commissioned by churches and guilds, he developed a visual language of drama, bodies twisting across bold diagonals, luminous flesh emerging from deep shadows, and gestures that telegraph spiritual intensity. The Raising of the Cross, a triptych made for the Cathedral of Our Lady in Antwerp, is the archetype of this approach. Look at the central panel's diagonal thrust as men strain to lift the cross, every figure sculpted with classical force but animated with Baroque momentum. Equally compelling is his descent from the cross, where sorrow and tenderness are compressed into a compact theatrical stage. Rubens painted multiple versions and studies of these scenes, refining composition, light, and the emotional choreography between figures. He treated religious narrative not as static illustration, but as theatrical performance, sacred drama made human and immediate. Mythology offered Rubens a playground for color, movement, and eroticism. The Three Graces gathers 3 bodies in a spiraling embrace. It's classical in subject, but Baroque in tempo, a study in rhythm and soft, luminous flesh. The Death of Adonis turns grief into sumptuous composition, a fallen youth, a distraught Venus, and a chorus of putti and attendants organized for maximum poignancy. The Toilet of Venus and the Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus show how Rubens balanced sensuality with narrative urgency, fleshy forms, dynamic foreshortening, and a palette that heightens emotion. Allegory and myth allowed him to celebrate beauty and power while demonstrating mastery of anatomy, drapery, and gesture. Those paintings were often among the most sought after by collectors who wanted both classical learning and Baroque theater on their walls. Rubens was not only a history painter, he was a superb portraitist who conveyed personality and social standing with ease. Portraits like the Straw Hat, often identified with Helena Fourment, combine immediacy and elegance. The sitter's gaze, the textured hat, the subtle modeling of the skin. His warmth toward family is visible in intimate group portraits and in his depictions of Helena Fourment, his young second wife, who appears in several tender paintings and drawings. Early portraits, like his depiction of Isabella Brandt in the Honeysuckle Bower, fuse symbolism and domestic affection. Rubens could flatter without sacrificing truth, producing portraits that functioned as social documents, private keepsakes, and exercises in painterly economy all at once. Rubens ran one of the most efficient and creative workshops of the 17th century. He produced oil sketches, preparatory drawings, and compositional studies that helped him manage enormous commissions. A study for the Adoration of the Magi reveals how he experimented with lighting and figure placement before executing a large panel. His studies for Daniel in the Lion's Den show how single figure poses evolved into a finished composition. Rubens personally drew and made many oil sketches. Some were prized collector's items on their own, and he delegated repetitive passages to trusted assistants. This system allowed him to be prolific without losing his unmistakable touch. Look closely at workshop sheets, and you'll find corrections, quick gestures, and the hand of a master thinking aloud. Rubens was also a courtier and diplomat. His travels and missions to Spain and England deepened his network and his art market. He was knighted by both Philip IV and Charles I, and he used his status to build a remarkable collection of antiques and drawings. Portraits he painted of nobles and governors, like Infanta Clara Eugenia and military commanders, underscore his role as an artist who navigated power as deftly as paint. At the same time, his private life, 2 marriages, a bustling household, and a garden that inspired compositions, fed his work. The Garden of Love blends aristocratic festivity with the intimacy of a man who loved collecting, entertaining, and orchestrating life as elegantly as he composed a canvas. In his later years, Rubens remained astonishingly productive. He ran a diplomatic household, managed large commissions, and continued experimenting with scale, color, and myth. Paintings like later Adoration compositions and numerous versions of Daniel in the Lion's Den show a mature artist comfortable with reworking ideas and adapting them to patrons' needs. His influence rippled across Europe. French and English painters borrowed his monumental gestures. Italian artists learned from his color, and generations of Baroque painters absorbed his merged classical Baroque vocabulary. Beyond technique, his model of a studio as both an artistic and commercial enterprise changed how artists worked and how art circulated across courts. Peter Paul Rubens remains a pivot between Renaissance classical learning and Baroque theatricality. His canvases dazzle because they balance study and spontaneity, intellect and sensuous delight. Whether it's the agony and tenderness of the Descent from the Cross, the playful abundance of the Garden of Love, or the warm immediacy of his portraits, Rubens invites us to experience painting as both spectacle and intimate conversation. When you next stand before one of his works, watch for the compositional strategies, the diagonal volleys, the glowing flesh tones, the lively brushwork, and remember the artist behind them. A traveler, a collector, a diplomat, and an utterly modern studio boss who knew how to turn ideas into masterpieces. If these stories sparked your curiosity, explore his drawings and oil sketches next. They're the closest thing to stepping into Rubens's workshop.